All right, Rob, let's get to it. We were on the air when this game started last night. The New York Jets. You heard Isaac say that it was, what did he say, the second most watched game on Monday Night Football in quite some time. And the Jets, of course, went down 32-19 in San Francisco to the 49ers. No surprise that they lost. It would have been a surprise, actually, had they won. Wasn't a close game. And Aaron Rodgers was okay. He didn't look special. He was fine. First start in a year and a half. We'll get to him later. But, Rob, what was kind of your biggest takeaway from what we saw last night from the Jets?
That everybody ballyhooed about how great their defense is. And they were a no-show yesterday, Chris Broussard. 8 straight scoring drives? That ain't no top 10 defense, top 5 defense. And they got run through like a hot knife through butter. Like, what did they do? That was supposed to be their saving grace, is the defense. What was that other game last year, Black Friday? You know, every Friday is Black Friday for us, Chris. But Black Friday, they got chewed up too last year.
Yeah, Miami 34-13.
Exactly.
Similar score, yes.
They've
had some games. As good as their defense was, I mean, you mentioned it, 34 to Miami, 32 to Buffalo, 30 to Dallas. Some of that was defense scoring. They gave up 37 to Cleveland, which was no offensive, juggernaut. 30 to Miami in the second game they played against them. So maybe it's that they were really good against. I can't even say that.
Well, let me give you this stat.
They beat Philly and Houston and held them
and Buffalo.
Check.
Remember to whatever it was in that first game. But last year the Jets gave up 27 points, Chris, 7 times. The second worst defense in the league, right?
In that regard,
At Arizona, I'm just saying Arizona was the worst defense. Arizona gave up 26.8 per game, but the Jets did it 7 times. They gave up 27. And obviously they had those other games, right, because of the other games. Last year the Jets gave up 400 yards 5 times. The worst defense, Washington, gave up an average of 389, Chris, per game. And obviously we said 5 out of 17.
I mean, that's not their average.
And statistically the Jets were either like one of the best or worst on a week-to-week basis, and they're not always that consistent. I just think, like, the one part that was supposed to be there, and Chris, I'm with you. They were 4.5-point underdogs, and that would have been a big win. Aaron Rodgers hadn't played in over a year and all the other stuff that had gone on. Like, that would have been a huge statement win if they would have won that game. But the defense was woefully disappointing. It just was really 8 straight possessions, Chris. That's bad.
Yeah, the defense was no show. I mean, if you want to look at the glass half full, you can say, well, they held them to a lot of field goals. I think they had 6 field goals, but that was supposed to be the strength of this team, and I still think it can. Now we'll see. Also, Rob, one of the winners yesterday was Hassan Reddick, who's holding out for a new contract with the Jets. And the Jets, I don't think they'll pay him this week. I think they'll, see how things go in their next few games. But what I will say about the Jets, Rob, and Hassan Reddick is that they're in win now mode.
They got
obviously,
to be.
right? Like this year, and neither you nor I think they're going to win the Super Bowl, even in the next 2 years. But for them, we're going for the Super Bowl this year. We're going for the Super Bowl next year, assuming Aaron Rodgers is here. And so if that's the case, then you really need to look at it like this year. Because like I said, we'll get into Aaron Rodgers, but he didn't look phenomenal. All right. And so you have to go for it this year. And if that means paying Hassan Reddick, then pay him. But get him on the field.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, no. You can't. What are you saving for?
Right.
It's not a 5-year plan. It's just outrageous to even be playing this game, Chris. You need to be 0-3 to decide that you're going to pay him. Is that what you need to start the season 0-3?
Because
it makes
Rob,
no sense.
If this is not a good season, by that I mean like they don't make the playoffs, then Saleh, Joe Douglas, the whole regime is probably gone. Is probably gone. And so they need to do everything they can to make the playoffs and, have the best season they can. But you're right. Defensively, they didn't show up. And, Rob, here's how bad it was defensively. Christian McCaffrey didn't even play.
Right.
So Jordan Mason, who was an undrafted running back. Now, that doesn't mean he can't run the ball. Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th-round draft pick. We've seen undrafted running backs, and even players in general, have some success in the league. So he obviously can run the football. Last night he had 28 carries for 147 yards. But again, that came without Christian McCaffrey, who was regarded by most as the best running back in the league.
That's the scary part.
And they still had their way. Right. They still had their way. Now, the Jets, Rob, they got Tennessee next week. That's a game
they don't beat Tennessee.
Win. No, if they don't beat Tennessee, then it's time to really it might be time to hit the panic button.
No, I agree. I mean, if that is, I don't know what the spread. We don't know what the spread is for that game yet, Rob G. We do, but if that's not, that should be in the books. Book it, Chris.
The good news for them, Rob, they got Tennessee, then New England. Now, Tennessee, of course, is Sunday on short rest, but then they get New England on Thursday. So their next 2 games will be short rest. That's challenging. However, they're not very good teams.
That's funny.
And then you got Denver and Minnesota. So, Rob, if they're what people, especially people in New York, have expected them to be, and I expect them to win the division. That was my pick. We'll see if they do. But if they're what people think they are, thought they were, then they should be 4-1.
Jets are minus 3.5, Chris, in that game against the Titans. Yeah. So, 3 points is usually, what.
And it's at Tennessee.
Yeah,
so
3 points. So
really
they give them a little.
You get 3 at home.
At home, usually.
It's really
right.
a 6-point game.
Right.
They're thinking.
6.5. Because it's 3.5.
So, yeah, I mean, but you're right. The defense was not what it was expected to be. And Robert Saleh, who I do think is certainly a good defensive coach. I don't think he's really had a chance to prove whether or not he's a good coach overall because he's had such abysmal quarterback play, right? Like he's won. I give him credit for winning 7 games each of the last 2 years with Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco. Now, Flacco redeemed himself last year in Cleveland, but still, Flacco's not, anything to write home about at this point. And, he was able to win some games last year. You mentioned beat Buffalo. They beat Philly. They beat Houston. But now, that's not going to save your job. Now is the time for you to get it done. Your guys are healthy. And so everybody's looking at Saleh. And his job is literally on the line, right?
Oh, there's no doubt. Like Saleh is on life support. He just is. He's okay, here's your defense. You're a defensive coach, and now you got your quarterback, and here's where people want to see what you can put together. We get it. No one's saying that they should have won in San Francisco or Santa Clara or wherever it is, Chris. Nobody's saying that. But for the defense to be a no-show was a little surprising for me. That's all.